Well, it isn't enough that China has tried to intimidate us with trade bans, has refused to take calls from our ministers, has hit us with massive cyber attacks, has tried to shut us up by arresting Australians like journalist Chang Lei. Now China is warning us it will remember. China's most high-profile diplomat in Australia, the deputy head of its embassy, gave a speech saying, "Watch out. History," he said, "will prove that it is wise and visionary to be China's friends. And your children and grandchildren would be proud of you. But those of us, like journalists, deliberately vilifying China and sabotaging the friendship between our two countries will be cast aside in history. Their children will be ashamed of mentioning their names." Well, personally, I think the people who'd end up having their children ashamed of their grandparents are the people who locked up 1 million Muslim Chinese and said nothing when China did just that. Or the officials who are crushing freedom now in Hong Kong just this past week, demanding that civil servants swear loyalty to the communist regime or lose their jobs. Or the people who are charging 47 pro-democracy activists and politicians with subversion for wanting democracy, not even offering them bail. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Adrian Brown, an Australian correspondent who reported on Hong Kong from Hong Kong for over 16 years. Adrian, it's an honour to have you join us. How should we interpret the embassy's warning?
Well, actually, the Chinese text of what he said is a lot stronger. He referred to critics of China as being scum. And, I can't think of an occasion where a diplomat has used a word like that in a host country to sum up the people in that host country. It is a measure, if you like, of just how deeply, unhappy China remains with Australia. But if you also look at the speech, within it, I detected fragments of an olive branch. He stressed the long relationship, the friendship between China and Australia. And he said, we stand by our old friends. So possibly, there was, as I say, just possibly the hint of an olive branch there. But, big picture, I think if Australia is expecting any major concessions from China this year, from President Xi Jinping, forget about this, because this is a year when China's leader has to appear especially strong. And there's a reason for that, because in July, the Communist Party marks its centenary. It's 100 years old, and that's a very, very big deal in China. And so every major decision that is now made will have to be seen, in that context. And you'll get a flavour of that in just a few days' time, Andrew, when the National People's Congress, China's annual session of parliament, opens in Beijing. You spoke about Hong Kong in your introduction, and we are expecting to see more shock and awe over Hong Kong, because state media in China has been, advertising in advance what's going to be discussed at the NPC, and it seems that more electoral reform for Hong Kong is on the way. And when I say electoral reform, I'm talking about the final dismantlement of the pro-democracy camp here in Hong Kong. They're going to change the way the chief executive is elected. That comprises of a sort of body of 1,200 officials, some of whom are from the pro-democracy camp. They're now going to be removed from that committee. And also district councillors, the lowest rung of government here in Hong Kong, are going to have to do oaths of allegiance, pledge oaths of allegiance to the country. China says they don't have to pledge oaths of allegiance to the Communist Party, but a lot of people say, well, it's still the same thing. If you're pledging allegiance to the country, is controlled by the Communist Party. So these are extraordinary times, and there were extraordinary scenes outside West Kowloon Magistrates Court on Monday when I attended the start of that marathon bail hearing, which, by the way, is still going on. On the opening day, Andrew, it went on for 15 hours. Some of the activists were so tired they fainted, had to be taken to hospital. Others were just nodding off in their seats. And it did, in a sense, have a sort of darkly, weirdly comedic side to it. But of course, it's also very dark indeed. The real action was happening outside the court, where it almost had the feel of the protests of 2019, with people holding up banners openly defying the national security law, by the way, people were saying not so much borderline seditious slogans, but slogans that were openly seditious. The police seem to use a tactic of restraint. And I have to be fair to the authorities. They did what they can to ensure that everybody who could get inside the court could do so. They opened up a couple of extra courts, overflow courts, so proceedings could be beamed into those courts. And I think the message was from the Hong Kong government, we still have an independent judiciary and the media is still free to report these proceedings.
Yeah, they might have that, Adrian, but they also have laws that equate sedition with wanting more democracy and not necessarily Chinese loyal candidates there, or Communist China loyal candidates. This is what disturbs me. I mean, for me, you've lived there for ages, and I was only there for a year and a half, but the sight of seeing Jimmy Lai, the second biggest media tycoon, in handcuffs, arrested for sedition, I just think is, that says it all for me. Adrian Brown, I hope to come back to you. In fact, I fear I will be coming back to you quite a bit this year as the heavy hand goes down in that once beautiful city. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, I hope I'm here.
Yeah, well, I worry about that too, mate. That's not a joke, but we'll see. Yeah, good. You be careful. Thanks for your time.